The mythic age, before time had memory, the way the Greeks saw the world didn't kick off with history. It all started with these amazing myths that told the story of how everything came to be: the cosmos, humanity, and the divine order. These tales laid the groundwork for Greek civilization and all its incredible achievements. In the beginning, there was chaos, not just a mess, but this huge, empty void. From this nothingness, Gaia popped up as the first being and the mother of all. She gave birth to Uranus, the sky, the mountains, and Pontus, the sea. Together, Gaia and Uranus created the Titans, 12 powerful deities, with the youngest and smartest being Cronus. Uranus was scared of his own kids, so he trapped them inside Gaia, which really hurt her. Gaia got back at him by making a big sickle and giving it to Cronus, who used it to castrate his dad. From Uranus's spilled blood came the Furies, the Giants, and the Malaya, ash tree nymphs. And from the sea foam created by his severed parts, the beautiful goddess Aphrodite was born. Cronus took over the cosmos and married his sister Rhea, but just like his dad, he was terrified of being taken down by his own kids. There was a prophecy that said one of them would overthrow him, so he swallowed each child as Rhea gave birth: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. When Zeus was born, Rhea tricked Cronus by wrapping a stone in baby clothes, which he swallowed instead. Zeus was hidden away and raised in secret on Crete. When Zeus grew up, he made Cronus spit out his siblings. Now free, he led them in a long war against the Titans. With the help of the 100-handed ones in the Cyclopes, whom he rescued from Tartarus, the younger gods finally won. The Titans were thrown into Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld, and Zeus and his siblings, the Olympians, took charge of the cosmos. After their big win, the Olympian gods set up a divine hierarchy. Zeus took charge of the sky and became the king of the gods. His brother Poseidon got control over the seas, rivers, and earthquakes, while Hades ruled the underworld. Hera became Zeus's wife and queen, overseeing marriage. Demeter looked after agriculture, and Hestia managed the sacred hearth. Soon, other Olympians joined this divine family. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, burst forth fully formed and armored from Zeus's head. Apollo became the god of light, music, and prophecy. His twin sister Artemis ruled over the hunt and the wild. Ares was in charge of warfare. Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty. Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, mastered fire and metallurgy. Hermes acted as the messenger of the gods. Dionysus was the god of wine and festivity. Each of these deities had their own special domains, symbols, and sacred animals. Their intricate relationships mirrored human social structures, giving explanations for natural events. The Greeks didn't see their gods as flawless. Instead, the Olympians showed human traits like jealousy, lust, anger, compassion, and wisdom that turned up to 11. The story of humanity's beginnings is tied to Prometheus, a titan who sided with Zeus. According to Hesiod, Prometheus shaped humans from clay, while Athena breathed life into them. As the champion of mortals, Prometheus wanted to improve their lives. When Zeus introduced the practice of sacrifice, Prometheus came up with a clever plan to help humans. He split a sacrificial bull into 2 parts, one with tasty meat hidden under unappealing skin, and the other with bones disguised under shiny fat. Zeus, thinking he was making a good choice, picked the shiny bones and fat, which set up a tradition where humans sacrificed the bones and fat to the gods while keeping the meat for themselves. Furious over this trick, Zeus took fire away from humanity. But Prometheus, not wanting to see his creation suffer, stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans in a hollow fennel stalk. This bold move made Zeus really angry. He had Prometheus chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where an eagle would eat his liver every day, which would grow back overnight, keeping him in endless pain. It wasn't until centuries later that Heracles freed Prometheus during his adventures. Zeus didn't stop there. He also punished humanity. He asked Hephaestus to create Pandora, the first woman. She was gifted by various gods, but she also came with curiosity and deceit. Zeus sent her to Prometheus's brother Epimetheus with a sealed jar, often wrongly called a box. Even though Prometheus warned Epimetheus not to accept gifts from Zeus, he welcomed Pandora, who eventually opened the jar, letting loose all kinds of evils and hardships into the world. The only thing left trapped inside was hope, which explains humanity's suffering and its lasting ability to stay optimistic. Hesiod's Works and Days presents a narrative of gradual human decline through 5 successive ages. The Golden Age, under Cronus's rule, was a time of perfect harmony, abundance, and peace. Humans lived like gods, free from suffering and aging. The Silver Age, beginning under Zeus's reign, produced a markedly inferior humanity of childlike beings who lived briefly in foolish discord before dying. The Bronze Age was populated by a warlike race obsessed with violence, who eventually destroyed themselves. The Heroic Age, the only upward trend, produced the great heroes of myth who fought at Thebes and Troy. The Iron Age, Hesiod's own time, was an era of constant labor, suffering, and moral decay. This myth reinforces Greek pessimism about moral progress while exalting their heroic past. The Mythic Age reached its zenith in the stories of heroes mortals of extraordinary ability who exemplified Greek virtues. Heracles embodied physical strength. Persecuted by Hera, he faced his greatest challenge after killing his own children. As atonement, he was commanded to perform 12 seemingly impossible labors. Through these feats, he journeyed across the known world and beyond, establishing his reputation as the greatest of heroes. His transformation into a god upon his death represented the highest possible achievement for a mortal. Perseus embodied cunning and divine favor. Aided by Athena and Hermes, he undertook the suicide mission of beheading Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone. Using a reflective shield, he beheaded her as she slept. From her severed neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse. Theseus, identified with Athens's civic ideals, represented heroism in service to civilization. He volunteered to join the tribute of youths sent to Crete to be devoured by the Minotaur. With the help of King Minos's daughter, Ariadne, he navigated the labyrinth, slew the Minotaur, and led the youths to freedom. He later unified Attica under Athenian governance, making him both monster slayer and civilization builder. Jason led the Argonauts, a company of Greece's greatest heroes, on the quest for the Golden Fleece. He succeeded with the help of the sorceress Medea, who had fallen in love with him. These hero myths connected aristocratic families to divine ancestry, established pan-Hellenic cultural bonds, and offered models of excellence for Greek youth. No mythic story is more significant than the Trojan War cycle, which tells the tale of a 10-year conflict between a bunch of Greek kingdoms and the city of famed Troy. While later digs confirmed that Troy was real, The Greeks mainly understood this epic through myths and poetry, especially Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. So, how did it all start? Well, it all goes back to some divine drama. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, the goddess Eris, Discord, showed up uninvited and tossed a golden apple into the crowd, marked for the fairest. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, claimed it, and Zeus decided to let Paris, a prince of Troy, choose. Each goddess tried to bribe him. Hera offered power, Athena promised glory, and Aphrodite dangled the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, who was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris picked Aphrodite. Later, when Paris visited Sparta, he took Helen back to Troy. Menelaus called on all of Helen's former suitors to defend her, and his brother Agamemnon rallied a force of Greek kingdoms. This crew included legendary figures like the clever Odysseus, wise Nestor, the giant Ajax, and the great warrior Achilles. The Greek fleet struggled to set sail because of bad winds, until Agamemnon made a tough choice. He sacrificed his daughter, Iphigenia, to appease Artemis. Finally, the Greeks landed near Troy and kicked off a long siege. Homer's Iliad zooms in on a few intense weeks in the 9th year, focusing on Achilles' fury after Agamemnon took his captive woman, Briseis. When Achilles withdrew from battle, the Trojans, led by Hector, pushed the Greeks back to their ships. It wasn't until Achilles' dear friend Patroclus fell to Hector's spear that he rejoined the fight, avenging his friend by slaying Hector and desecrating his body. The epic wraps up with Hector's funeral. The rest of the war was packed with key moments that the Iliad didn't cover. For starters, Amazon and Ethiopian forces showed up to back Troy. Then, there was the dramatic moment when Paris shot Achilles in his weak heel with an arrow guided by Apollo. Ajax, feeling defeated after Odysseus snagged Achilles' armor, took his own life. And let's not forget the Trojan horse, a huge wooden structure filled with Greek warriors. They snuck it into the city, and when night fell, the hidden Greeks came out, opened the gates for their army, and brutally sacked Troy. In the end, the war left both winners and losers scattered. The surviving Trojans, especially Aeneas, faced enslavement or exile, while the returning Greeks had their own wild fates. Agamemnon met a tragic end at the hands of his wife, Clytemnestra, and Odysseus had a decade of crazy adventures before finally making it back to Ithaca, as we see in the Odyssey. The Trojan cycle gave the Greeks a shared story that helped them connect with each other, even when their city-states were all over the place. It tackled big ideas like honor, fate, and the struggle between being an individual and fitting in with the community. These myths were more than just fun tales. They were the backbone of how the Greeks understood the universe, their place in it, and what it meant to be Greek. Since there wasn't any official religious doctrine, these stories offered flexible yet clear explanations for everything from nature to social norms and morals. They painted a picture of a world where divine forces were everywhere, but they also followed understandable patterns. This mythological setup helped the Greeks see a universe that, while tough and unpredictable, still made sense. These stories also set the stage for what it meant to be excellent and human. Heroes showed that while mortals could achieve greatness, they were still bound by fate and mortality. This push and pull became a key part of Greek culture. Myths brought people together through shared holy sites, festivals, and stories, laying the groundwork for Greece's future successes in philosophy, science, politics, and art. Bronze Age civilizations, see 3000 to 1100 BC. As we peel back the layers of mythology, archaeological discoveries shine a light on the first complex societies that thrived in the Aegean from around the 3rd to the 2nd millennium BC. The Bronze Age was a time when advanced civilizations rose and fell, laying down the groundwork for what would become later Greek culture. The Aegean Bronze Age blossomed a bit later than those in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but it crafted its own unique cultures filled with technological innovations and social structures. Nestled at the crossroads of 3 continents, these early societies flourished thanks to maritime connections that fueled trade and cultural exchanges. The Aegean's unique geography, its islands, peninsulas, and winding coastlines made seafaring essential, turning maritime trade into the lifeblood of these communities. In the early 3rd millennium, a game-changer emerged: bronze technology. This mix of copper and tin led to stronger tools and weapons, revolutionizing agriculture, craftsmanship, and warfare. Mastering metallurgy became a sought-after skill, and having control over metal resources meant gaining significant power. Plus, bronze sparked long-distance trade, as tin was hard to come by in the Aegean and had to be sourced from faraway lands. 2 main civilizations ruled the Aegean Bronze Age: the Minoans of Crete and the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece. While they were linked through trade, each developed its own distinct social structures and artistic styles. The Minoan civilization emerged on Crete in the early 3rd millennium BC, named after the legendary King Minos. This culture set the stage for the first advanced civilization in Europe. The lack of defensive walls around major Minoan settlements hints at a relatively peaceful society, confident in its maritime strength. At the heart of Minoan civilization were the amazing palace complexes, especially the one at Knossos. These palaces were like bustling hubs, combining administrative, religious, storage, and production spaces all in one. They showcased impressive architectural features, including multiple stories, light wells, advanced drainage systems, and indoor plumbing that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for thousands of years. The sprawling Knossos Palace, covering over 5 acres, had a layout so intricate that it probably inspired the Greek myth of the labyrinth. And let's not forget the vibrant frescoes that decorated the walls, bringing to life scenes of nature, religious ceremonies, and athletic events, including the thrilling bull-leaping ritual. Minoan society was structured around these palaces. At the top was a ruler, likely a priest-king, who held both political and religious power. The palace elites managed a complex economy that gathered agricultural surplus and controlled trade with other lands. Bureaucrats relied on advanced record-keeping methods, starting with a pictographic script called hieroglyphic Minoan, and later using Linear A, a syllabic script that remains a mystery today. When it came to religion, Minoans focused on female deities, often depicting a goddess with snakes or surrounded by animals. Sacred caves, mountaintop shrines, and palace worship sites were all part of their spiritual life. The recurring bull imagery in their art suggests this animal was really important to them, possibly symbolizing fertility and strength. Minoan artists were incredibly talented, creating works that burst with life and color. Their frescoes celebrated nature and movement, showing everything from marine life to blooming flowers and graceful figures. Their pottery evolved from simple designs to the stunning marine style, decorated with octopuses and dolphins. Even with their small size, the Minoans built a thriving maritime empire, connecting Crete with Egypt, the Levant, and the Greek mainland. In the mid-15th century, the Minoan civilization faced a major decline. You can see the scars of destruction on many palaces, and historians still debate whether a natural disaster, invasion, or internal revolt caused this downfall. As Minoan influence faded, the Mycenaean culture from the mainland stepped in to fill the gap. While the Minoans thrived on Crete, a unique culture was blossoming on the Greek mainland after 1600 BC. This Mycenaean civilization became the first advanced society dominated by Greek-speaking folks. Named after the famous citadel of Mycenae, this culture gradually spread its influence across the entire Aegean region. Unlike the peaceful Minoans, the Mycenaeans had a more martial vibe. Their settlements were built around heavily fortified citadels on defensible hills. These strongholds had massive stone walls made from huge blocks, so impressive that later Greeks thought they were built by mythical cyclopes. The Lion Gate at Mycenae is still a stunning example of this architecture. Mycenaean palaces were centered around the megaron, a rectangular hall with a central hearth. This style would later inspire Greek temple architecture. The palaces acted as administrative hubs, royal power centers, and redistribution points. The social structure here was more rigid compared to Minoan Crete. At the top was the Wainax, a king who held military, political, and religious authority. A warrior aristocracy controlled wealth and power. Archaeological finds and linear B tablets show a tightly controlled economy, with administrators keeping detailed records of goods and people. The Mycenaean elite flaunted their status with lavish burial goods, like gold death masks, bronze weapons, and intricately crafted jewelry. Mycenaean culture shows a mix of homegrown development and strong Minoan influence. You'd find fresco paintings on palace walls depicting lively scenes of processions, hunting, and warfare. Pottery also took a turn, evolving from Minoan designs into unique styles, especially those pictorial vases showcasing warriors and chariots. One of the biggest achievements of the Mycenaeans was adapting the linear A script to write the Greek language, which became known as Linear B, the clay tablets that survived the fires destroying the palaces. Give us a peek into a detailed administrative system. Even though these documents mainly served administrative purposes, they are earliest evidence of the Greek language. When it comes to religion, Mycenaean beliefs borrowed elements from both their Minoan predecessors and what would later become classical Greek practices. The Linear B tablets list offerings to gods that are recognizable from later Greek mythology, including Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Artemis, and Dionysus. By around 1400 BC, the Mycenaeans had expanded their power throughout the Aegean. They took control of Minoan Crete, occupied various islands, and set up trading outposts along the Anatolian coasts. You can find Mycenaean goods all over the Mediterranean, which shows they had extensive trade networks. The Mycenaean period also lines up with the legendary tales of Greek mythology. The citadels of Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, and Thebes pop up in stories about gods and heroes. Archaeological finds support some of these myths. The city of Troy was a major settlement, and the massive fortifications of mainland centers match descriptions from Homer's Tales. For most people living in Bronze Age Greece, daily life revolved around farming. They cultivated the Mediterranean triad of wheat, olives, and grapes. Beyond farming, specialized crafts sprang up to provide tools, textiles, pottery, and other essentials. Both Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations were heavily involved in maritime trade, moving olive oil, wine, and goods around the Mediterranean while bringing back tin, ivory, and precious stones. As the 13th century BC wrapped up, this complex Bronze Age world started to fall apart. In just a couple of generations, flames consumed most major palaces and settlements across the eastern Mediterranean. The reasons behind this Bronze Age collapse are still up for debate. Some think climate change led to agricultural failures, while records from Hittite Anatolia and Ugarit in Syria mention food shortages and attacks from seaborne raiders known as the Sea Peoples. Civil conflict and earthquakes might have played a part too. The fallout was huge. The Mycenaean palace system crumbled, taking down centralized administration, record-keeping, and specialized crafts with it. Long-distance trade routes fell apart, and the population took a nosedive, leading to abandoned urban centers. Greece slipped into a time of reduced complexity and isolation that lasted for centuries. The legacy of the Bronze Age civilizations is a bit mixed. With direct continuity broken, they lost literacy, architectural skills, and artistic traditions. But hey, cultural memories lived on through oral traditions, keeping the spirit of that earlier greatness alive. The epic heroes of myth, the legendary Trojan War, and stories of rich kingdoms became the foundation for the Greeks of the archaic and classical periods, reminding them of their glorious past. The Greek Dark Age, c. 1100 to 800 BC. After the Bronze Age collapse, Greece entered a tough time of regression. For about 3 centuries, Greek civilization took a step back from the complexity it had enjoyed during the Mycenaean era. This Dark Age was marked by a big drop in population, the abandonment of thriving settlements, and a loss of important technologies. One of the biggest losses was literacy. The linear B script completely disappeared, leaving Greece without writing for nearly 4 centuries. It's pretty wild to think about a society that once kept detailed records going dark like that. You could really see the decline in material culture, too. The fancy pottery of the late Bronze Age gave way to simpler styles with less decoration. The proto-geometric pottery that popped up featured basic circular designs and geometric patterns. Metallurgy took a hit as well, with fewer and simpler bronze items being made after trade networks for tin fell apart. Architecture also simplified, with grand palaces replaced by modest mud, brick, and stone structures. Overall, it felt like societies were operating on a much smaller scale and with less complexity. The economy shrank dramatically. Long-distance trade dropped to a fraction of what it used to be, and communities became more self-sufficient, relying on local resources. Political organization changed too. The Wainax and his palatial administration disappeared, and authority likely shifted to local chieftains or basileis who controlled smaller areas. Governance became more personal, rooted in kinship rather than institutions. Despite all this regression, the Dark Age wasn't just about loss. It was a time when the foundations of what would become a distinctively Greek culture started to take shape. This period was super important for the Greek language, which really took off across the mainland and islands. With no centralized authority, different regions got to develop their own dialects, leading to groups like Ionic, Doric, Aeolic, and Arcadian Cypriot that shaped the Greek-speaking world. And let's not forget about the epic poems linked to Homer. Even though they were written down way later, they kept the memories of this transitional time alive. The Iliad and Odyssey show a society that's quite different from the Mycenaean palace days and the later city-state culture. They focus on aristocratic households and the personal loyalty that tied people together. This oral tradition was super important for keeping culture alive, with professional bards memorizing and sharing stories that weren't just entertaining, but also held cultural memory and social values. When it comes to religion, there was a mix of continuity and change. The major gods we know from Mycenaean times stayed important, but worship became more localized. Important sanctuaries like Olympia kept the religious vibe going from the late Bronze Age through the Dark Age. These sites turned into neutral spots where different communities could meet up. In fact, the earliest Olympic Games, dating back to 776 BC, came from these gatherings. The Dark Age also saw some cool tech advancements. Ironworking spread across Greece, gradually taking over from bronze for tools and weapons. By the later Dark Age, the Greeks had really nailed down how to make high-quality iron tools, setting the stage for economic growth down the line. In the final centuries of the Dark Age, things started to pick up again. Archaeological finds from the 10th and especially the 9th century BC show more people, bigger settlements, and a rise in material wealth. Trade began to bounce back, starting locally and then reaching out further. By the late 9th century, Greek merchants were back in touch with the Near East, kicking off exchanges that would spark a cultural renaissance. Population movements during the Dark Age really shaped the linguistic and cultural landscape of Greece. There were some major migrations, especially of Greek speakers moving from the mainland to the Aegean Islands and the western coast of Anatolia. These shifts explain how different dialects spread across historical Greece and added to the vibrant regional cultures we see. By the early 8th century BC, Greece was on the brink of a big change. The population was growing, farming was getting better, and trade networks were expanding. One of the coolest things that happened was contact with the Phoenicians, who brought in a game-changing innovation, an alphabetic writing system that matched the sounds of Greek speech. This new system was way easier to use than the old linear B script, which opened the door to broader literacy and set the stage for the amazing literary and intellectual achievements that followed. So the Dark Age isn't just a gap in history. It's a key transitional period. Even with all the material setbacks, these centuries laid the groundwork for cultural patterns that would define Greek civilization. The Greece that emerged was quite different from the Mycenaean days, but it carried forward important memories and traditions, reinterpreted in new ways. The Archaic period and rise of the polis, c. 800 to 500 BC. The 8th century BC was a game-changer for Greek history. Emerging from the Dark Age, Greece entered an incredible transformation known as the Archaic Age. Over the next 300 years, Greek civilization saw remarkable growth and innovation in all areas of life. One of the biggest developments during this time was the rise of the polis, or city-state. It wasn't just a city or a state like we think of today. The polis was a unique community that blended an urban center, the surrounding countryside, and its citizens into a single entity with its own laws, customs, and identity. Each polis acted like its own sovereign state, yet they all felt connected as part of a larger Greek cultural world. The layout of a typical polis really showed off this dual nature. At its core was the asti, or urban center, usually built around a defensible spot called the Acropolis. Initially a refuge during attacks, the Acropolis grew to be a religious site, home to important temples. Below it was the Agra, an open space serving as a marketplace, a place for political gatherings, and a social hub. Surrounding this urban heart was the Chora, or countryside, which provided vital agricultural land. Each polis carved out its own identity, often linked to mythical founders or divine patrons. For example, Athens looked to the goddess Athena as its protector and celebrated its legendary king Theseus. Meanwhile, Sparta honored the divine twins Castor and Pollux. Despite their fierce independence, these early Peleus recognized they were part of a shared Hellenic culture, united by language, religion, and lifestyle. Even the largest polis, like Athens, had only tens of thousands of citizens. This smaller size encouraged direct participation in politics and fostered strong social bonds, but it also led to fierce competition for limited resources. Tensions between neighboring Peleus often flared into warfare. The reintroduction of writing was a huge deal during the early Archaic period. By adapting the Phoenician alphabet, the Greeks created a writing system that could fully represent vowel sounds, making it way more accessible and versatile. This new literacy helped solidify the foundations of Greek culture. Epic poems like those attributed to Homer were finally written down in the 8th century BC, giving Greeks examples of heroic behavior and a shared mythological background. Meanwhile, Hesiod's Theogony organized divine family trees, and his works and days shared practical and moral advice. During this time, the population really started to grow. With more people and not enough arable land, it set the stage for one of the most remarkable events of the era, overseas colonization. Starting in the mid-8th century BC, Greek communities began sending out organized groups to set up new Peleus across the Mediterranean and Black Sea. Unlike later imperial colonies, these Greek settlements were independent and politically autonomous. This wave of colonization transformed the Mediterranean world. Greek settlements popped up along the southern Italian and Sicilian coasts, an area known as Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece. Colonists also set up shop along the Black Sea, southern France, and North Africa. By 500 BC, hundreds of Greek Peleus dotted the Mediterranean, spreading Hellenic culture, trade networks, and political ideas. This colonization eased population pressures, secured access to essential resources, and boosted trade. Most importantly, it opened Greeks up to diverse cultures and ideas, sparking a wave of intellectual growth. Alongside this colonization, the economy was booming. Maritime trade thrived, and agriculture ramped up with a focus on cash crops like olive oil and wine for export. A game changer in this economic boom was the introduction of coinage, which came from Lydia in western Anatolia in the early 6th century BC. Coins made from electrum, gold, and silver quickly spread across the Greek world, with each polis minting its own currency featuring unique civic symbols. These economic developments contributed to significant social changes. The traditional aristocracy faced challenges from new groups, whose prosperity derived from trade or specialized agricultural production. A broader category of middling citizens emerged: independent farmers and craftsmen with sufficient property to equip themselves for military service and participate meaningfully in civic affairs. Military organization saw a major shift with the rise of hoplite warfare. These guys, known for their unique gear, fought in a tight formation called the phalanx. This style was all about teamwork and discipline rather than individual glory. Since hoplites usually had to buy their own gear, military service became tied to owning property. This connection really boosted the middling class in society, giving them a solid platform for political power down the line. In the early Archaic period, political structures were mostly dominated by aristocrats, but that was just a stepping stone. During the 7th and 6th centuries BC, Many communities went through phases of tyranny, where individuals grabbed power unconstitutionally, often with the backing of the people against the aristocrats. A lot of these early tyrants introduced popular policies and funded public projects. On the flip side, some communities created their own unique political systems without falling into tyranny. Take Sparta, for example. They developed a dual kingship, a council of elders, and an assembly of citizens. This setup, credited to the legendary lawmaker Lycurgus, brought stability, but also imposed strict social order. Athens, however, took a different route. After facing backlash for harsh early laws, Solon stepped in with major reforms in 594 BC that laid the groundwork for Athenian democracy. His changes included wiping out debts and establishing property classes for political involvement. After a period of tyranny, Athens underwent its final political transformation through Cleisthenes reforms in 508 to 507 BC, reshaping the citizen body and setting up the framework for classical democracy. Religious practices also got a makeover, becoming more organized around community sanctuaries and public festivals. Big temples started to replace smaller shrines, marking a shift to the iconic Greek temple style. The rise of pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, like Olympia and Delphi, was huge for religious life. These places hosted athletic competitions and festivals that brought people together, reinforcing a shared Hellenic identity. The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi became especially important, acting as both a religious hub and a neutral ground for diplomacy. Art also thrived during this time. Pottery moved from simple geometric designs to intricate black figure and red figure techniques, showcasing mythological stories and everyday scenes. Sculpture transformed dramatically too, evolving from stiff, stylized figures to more lifelike representations, with the famous archaic smile and frontal stance giving way to better anatomical accuracy. Intellectual life was buzzing, especially in the Ionian Greek communities of Western Anatolia. Thinkers like Thales and Anaximander started looking for natural explanations instead of relying on myths to understand cosmic events. These early philosophers proposed different fundamental substances as the building blocks of reality. This lively intellectual scene didn't just stop at physical ideas. It also dove into math, geography, and medicine. By the end of the 6th century BC, Greek civilization had really transformed. The polis had developed into a unique social and political structure. Economic growth soared, literacy spread beyond just the elite, and rational thinking began to challenge traditional myths. This blend of ideas set the stage for the amazing growth of classical Greek civilization. The Persian Wars would later test and prove the strength of these cultural and political advancements. The 4th century, crisis and transformation, 404 to 336 BC, the end of the Peloponnesian War, shook up the Greek world in a big way. The political scene that had shaped the 5th century fell apart, giving way to a more flexible mix of shifting alliances, rising powers, and foreign interference. Sparta, while victorious, wasn't really cut out for the leadership role and tried to impose its will on former Athenian allies. Sparta's win in 404 BC made it the top power in Greece, but its efforts to lead showed serious cracks. They set up narrow oligarchies that only served their interests, which made a lot of people unhappy. The small number of Spartan citizens couldn't handle the direct management of such a vast empire, and their education didn't equip them for the complex financial and diplomatic tasks at hand. The Spartan way of life, focused on military discipline and isolation, just didn't mesh well with the cosmopolitan approach needed for successful imperial leadership. These issues soon led to conflicts with former allies like Corinth and Thebes. Persia, which had helped Sparta financially during its last naval battles, switched gears and sent the Athenian admiral Conon with funds to create an anti-Spartan alliance. This sparked the Corinthian War 395–387 BC, which drained resources from all Greek sides, while Persian influence kept growing. The war wrapped up with the Peace of Antalcidas, or the King's Peace, dictated by the Persian king and enforced by Sparta. This agreement acknowledged Persian control over Greek cities in Asia Minor and demanded autonomy for other Greek states. Teaming up with Persia against fellow Greeks only sped up the decline of Spartan prestige. Sparta's downfall continued with a series of poor strategic choices. In 382 BC, a Spartan commander took over the Theban citadel and set up a narrow oligarchy backed by Spartan troops. This blatant power grab stirred up a lot of resentment. The tipping point came in 379 BC, when a small group of Theban exiles managed to overthrow the pro-Spartan government. Thebes quickly rose to power as a serious military force under Epaminondas, one of the most innovative military leaders in history. At the pivotal Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, he completely shattered Spartan military prestige. How? By stacking his best troops in a 50-deep formation on the left wing, he broke through the Spartan line and took down 400 of the 700 full Spartan citizens present. This battle was a game-changer for the Greek world. Epaminondas didn't stop there. He took bold steps into the Peloponnese, liberating Messenia and hitting at the core of Spartan power. Meanwhile, Athens was on its own path to recovery and realignment. After restoring democracy in 403 BC, the city maintained a surprising level of stability while slowly bouncing back economically. Athens's naval strength revived, and in 377 BC, the Second Athenian League formed, marking its best attempt to regain influence. This new alliance even included safeguards against Athenian imperial overreach. But you know how it goes, old habits die hard. The Social War, 357 to 355 BC, broke out when several major allies revolted against what they saw as Athenian imperialism, leading to the Confederation's collapse. Despite the political chaos, the 4th century was a hotbed of cultural and intellectual growth. Athens continued to shine as the cultural heart of the Greek world. Philosophical schools that popped up during this time would shape thought for centuries. Plato, a student of Socrates, founded his academy, diving into metaphysics, ethics, and political theory. His star pupil, Aristotle, opened his own school, the Lyceum, focusing on a more hands-on approach that covered politics, ethics, logic, and biology. Other schools like Cynicism and Cyrenaicism also made their mark. Oratory hit its peak in this era. Demosthenes, who overcame a childhood stutter, became Athens's most passionate political voice, rallying for resistance against Macedonian expansion. His rival, Aeschines, represented those who favored accommodation. The historian Xenophon provided crucial first-hand accounts of key events, including the journey of Greek mercenaries for a Persian prince, which he detailed in his work, Anabasis. In the visual arts, things were changing too. Sculpture became more naturalistic and expressive, moving away from the rigid styles of the past. Praxiteles crafted more relaxed, sensual figures, contrasting sharply with the stern dignity of earlier works. Portrait sculpture started to focus more on individuality, reflecting a growing appreciation for personal expression. Military affairs went through some serious changes that ultimately made the traditional polis military system outdated. The Peloponnesian War already showed us the limits of citizen hoplite armies during long campaigns, which led to a bigger reliance on mercenaries. As warfare became more professional and technical, the link between citizenship and military service started to fade. This opened the door for outside powers with deeper pockets to tap into Greek military skills for their own needs. The biggest winner from these shifts was Macedonia, sitting pretty on the northern edge of the Greek world. Under Philip II, who took the throne in 359 BC, Macedonia experienced rapid growth. Philip was a natural leader who knew how to seize the moment. He rolled out a series of military reforms that totally revamped his kingdom's fighting power, creating a professional standing army focused on heavily armed infantry and an elite cavalry force. At first, the Greek states didn't see the looming threat of Macedonian expansion. They were too caught up in their own internal conflicts, especially the Third Sacred War over the Delphic oracle. Philip cleverly took advantage of these divisions, positioning himself as a defender of Delphic Apollo. Only in Athens did a strong voice rise up against Philip's ambitions. Demosthenes, through his passionate speeches known as the Philippics, pushed for resistance. As Macedonian power steadily moved south, the Greek states finally started to recognize the danger. Demosthenes pulled off a major diplomatic win by uniting Athens with its old rival, Thebes, to stand against Macedonian growth. The showdown happened at Chaeronea in 338 BC, where the combined Theban and Athenian forces faced off against Philip's seasoned Macedonian troops. The battle turned on a brilliant cavalry charge led by Philip's young son Alexander, which broke the Theban sacred band and clinched a decisive victory for Macedonia. This battle pretty much marked the end of the Greek city-state's political independence. Philip's settlement after the Battle of Chaeronea showed his smart thinking and balanced approach. He set up Macedonian garrisons at key spots and reorganized the Greek states into a formal alliance called the League of Corinth, with him as the leader. This league required its members to stick to Macedonian foreign policy and put a stop to internal conflicts. In 337 BC, things really heated up when the League of Corinth officially declared war on Persia, with Philip taking the lead as the supreme commander. Tragically, in 336 BC, while at his daughter's wedding, Philip was assassinated. The throne then passed to Alexander, who would take his father's impressive legacy and turn it into one of the most incredible empires in history. Alexander the Great and the Hellenization of the East, 336 to 323 BC. When Alexander became king of Macedonia in the summer of 336 BC, no one could have guessed that this 20-year-old would change the world in just 13 years. He had an incredible education, blending traditional Macedonian warrior values with Greek philosophy, thanks to Aristotle. This mix created a ruler who was not only ambitious, but also complex. Right from the start, Alexander faced challenges. He quickly took out anyone who posed a threat to his throne. Southern Greek states, especially Thebes and Athens, saw his rise as a chance to break free. But Alexander wasn't having any of that. He marched south with a strong military presence to reassert Macedonian control. When Thebes revolted, he made a brutal example of the city, destroying it and selling the survivors into slavery. This harsh action sent a clear message and deterred further uprisings. By spring 334 BC, Alexander was ready to kick off the Persian campaign his father had planned. He crossed the Hellespont with around 37,000 troops. The first big battle happened at the Granicus River in northwestern Anatolia, where Alexander led his cavalry in a bold river crossing, causing chaos among the Persians. The Macedonians won decisively, gaining control of western Anatolia. His first major showdown with King Darius III took place at Issus in late 333 BC. Darius had made a big mistake by positioning his huge army in a narrow area that played to Alexander's strengths. Once again, Alexander charged straight at Darius, forcing the Persian king to flee and leaving his family behind. After this victory, Alexander secured the eastern Mediterranean coastline and took on the famous siege of Tyre, which lasted 7 months and showcased incredible engineering skills. He then entered Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator and pharaoh. While in Egypt, he founded Alexandria, his most famous city, and visited the oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis, where some sources say the oracle declared him the son of Zeus, causing some tension with his Macedonian commanders. In 331 BC, Alexander was all set to face Darius again, meeting the Persian army at Gaugamela, which is near modern Mosul. This battle was a real showcase of Alexander's tactical brilliance. He cleverly arranged his troops at an angle to the enemy line and charged in with his cavalry straight at Darius, who, once again, took off from the battlefield. The Persian army fell apart, and this battle pretty much sealed the fate of the Achaemenid Empire. After the victory, the Macedonians moved on to Babylon, which surrendered without a fight. Alexander was respectful of Babylonian religious and cultural traditions, showing a knack for cultural blending that became a hallmark of his reign. He then headed to Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia, where he captured a ton of treasure. After staying there for a while, he let the royal palace burn down, which some ancient sources say was either a drunken mistake or a calculated act of revenge for the Persian burning of Athens. This bold move marked a shift in his campaign, as he started to focus more on building a new universal empire rather than just defeating Persia. Next up was the hunt for Darius. But before Alexander's forces could catch him, Darius was killed by Bessus, the Bactrian satrap. Alexander gave Darius a proper burial, which was a sign of respect, and even started adopting some Persian court customs, much to the dismay of his Macedonian buddies. Tensions boiled over when Alexander, in a drunken rage, killed his friend Cletus the Black after Cletus criticized his Orientalist ways. Despite these personal struggles, Alexander pushed further east into Bactria and Sogdiana, today's Afghanistan and Central Asia. He secured the area through a mix of military might, strategic marriages with local nobles, and by setting up garrison cities filled with Greek and Macedonian settlers. One of the biggest moves was his marriage to Roxane, the daughter of a Bactrian nobleman. Alexander had big plans to push eastward to the Ganges and beyond, but at the Hyphasis River, his weary army finally said, "No way." After 3 days of trying to convince them, he had to accept their decision to turn back, marking the furthest point of his conquests. When he returned to the heart of Persia, Alexander faced the tough task of turning his massive conquests into a real empire. At Susa, he hosted a grand wedding where he and 90 of his officers married Persian women, showing off his dream of blending cultures. He also brought in 30,000 Persian youths, training them in Macedonian military techniques to strengthen his army. But not everyone was on board with these changes. Many traditional Macedonians pushed back. In his final year, Alexander focused on serious administrative work and ambitious plans, including a trip around Arabia and conquering North Africa. Unfortunately, before he could put these plans into action, he caught a fever in Babylon and passed away in June 323 BC, just shy his 33rd birthday. Alexander's 13-year reign forever changed the ancient world. His victories ended the Persian Empire, spread Greek culture across the Near East, opened trade routes between Europe and Asia, and founded many new cities. He kicked off the Hellenistic era, where Greek language and culture became the norm among the elites in a vast region. His campaigns also pushed forward geographical knowledge and sparked scientific curiosity. Beyond all these achievements, Alexander left behind a lasting legend. To those he conquered, he brought both destruction and new chances. For the Greeks, he symbolized the success of Hellenic civilization, while also challenging its political values. His biggest legacy might not be military. It was the cultural blend he created, merging Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and other traditions into new forms that influenced future civilizations, from Rome to Byzantium. The Hellenistic World 323146b. When Alexander the Great passed away in 323 BC, it left a huge power gap. His vast empire didn't have a clear way to choose a successor or a solid administrative system in place. So, guess what happened? Power shifted to Alexander's top commanders, who turned into rivals fighting for control of the empire. These Macedonian generals, known as the Diadochi or successors, pretended to hold the empire together for Alexander's heirs, while actually carving out their own territories. After Alexander's death, things got pretty chaotic with shifting alliances and conflicts, which we call the Wars of the Diadochi. The Battle of Ipsos in 301 BC was a game-changer, marking the end of hopes for a united empire when the ambitious successor Antigonus was defeated, leading to the division of his lands. With dreams of reuniting the empire gone, the Hellenistic world split into 3 major kingdoms and a bunch of smaller states. In Egypt, Ptolemy kicked off a dynasty that would last nearly 3 centuries, ending with Cleopatra as Seventh's defeat in 30 BC. The Ptolemaic kingdom, centered in Alexandria, enjoyed a pretty stable run. Then there's Seleucus, who came out on top of the chaos, controlling the largest chunk of Alexander's conquests, including Mesopotamia, Syria, and big parts of Iran and Central Asia. This massive Seleucid empire faced its own challenges, stretching from the Mediterranean all the way to India's borders. The Antigonid dynasty held on to the Macedonian homeland and influenced the Greek city-states to the south. Although it was the smallest of the 3 major kingdoms, it still packed a military punch. Besides these big players, several independent states popped up or regained their footing. The island of Rhodes became a major trade hub. Pergamon in western Anatolia blossomed into a cultural hotspot, and in Bactria, Greek rulers set up their own independent kingdom. Back in Greece, political innovation took off with the rise of federal structures like the Achaean and Aetolian leagues, breaking away from the old city-state model. Even with all the political mess, the Hellenistic world held on to a strong cultural unity. Greek became the go-to language for government, trade, and high culture. Cities founded by Alexander and his successors across Asia and Egypt served as key administrative centers and hubs of Hellenic culture. Alexandria stood out as the ultimate cosmopolitan city, home to the famous library and museum, making it the top research spot of the ancient world. The political scene in these Hellenistic kingdoms was a big shift from the citizen-focused city-states of earlier times. Monarchy took over as the standard form of government, with kings claiming their power through military victories, family ties, and even divine or heroic status. Royal authority was supported by bureaucracies that blended Macedonian military organization with Persian administrative methods. Economically, the Hellenistic period was a time of both integration and innovation. Alexander's conquests released a flood of Persian treasury gold, sparking commercial growth. New farming techniques and irrigation systems spread, and trade by sea boomed. Technological advancements also sped up, with figures like Archimedes of Syracuse developing mathematical principles that are still used today. Hellenistic art and architecture mirrored the diverse and emotional nature of the era. Sculptors broke away from classical restraint, moving toward more expressive and dynamic styles. Pieces like the Dying Gaul and the Laocoon group show this shift beautifully. Literature also transformed, shifting from civic themes to more personal, psychological, and exotic topics. Alexandrian poets embraced shorter, more refined forms. Philosophy adapted to the challenges of a more interconnected world. New schools of thought like Epicureanism and Stoicism emerged, offering guidance on how to live well. Epicureanism taught that happiness came from enjoying moderate pleasures and stepping back from politics, while Stoicism focused on virtue and understanding the cosmic order. Both philosophies helped people navigate a world where traditional civic identities were fading. Scientific exploration thrived in the Hellenistic environment, fueled by royal support, library resources, and the exchange of ideas. Euclid organized geometric knowledge in his Elements. Eratosthenes accurately measured the Earth's circumference, and Aristarchus of Samos proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system long before Copernicus. Medicine became more empirical, especially with dissection practices at Alexandria. Religious life during this time blended old traditions with new ideas. While traditional civic cults continued, they lost political power. Mystery religions that promised personal salvation gained traction, like the cults of Isis and Serapis. Hellenistic religion often mixed deities from different traditions, creating a rich tapestry of beliefs. The balance of power in the Hellenistic world stayed pretty stable through the 3rd century BC, but this equilibrium wouldn't last. Thanks to the rise of a new Mediterranean power, Rome. Rome's involvement in Eastern Mediterranean affairs threw the Hellenistic power balance into disarray. A major turning point came with the Second Macedonian War in 197 BC, where the Ramang Legion showcased its tactical superiority over the Macedonian phalanx. Rome's defeat of the Seleucid kingdom further weakened its influence. Initially, Rome didn't go for direct annexation, preferring to rule through client kings and allies. But its overwhelming military strength shifted the political dynamics of the Eastern Mediterranean. The destruction of Corinth in 146 B, the same year Rome took down Carthage, marked the end of Greek political independence. Macedonia became a Ramang province, and the gradual Ramang takeover of Hellenistic territories continued through the late Republic and early Empire. Ptolemaic Egypt kept up the appearance of independence until Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra, turning it into a Roman province in 30 BC. Even though politically overshadowed by Rome, Hellenistic culture stayed vibrant and influential, ultimately reshaping Roman society just as Roman armies transformed Hellenistic politics. Greek remained the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean under Roman rule, with Greek philosophy, literature, art, and religious ideas deeply impacting Roman intellectual and cultural development. The blend of Greek and Roman elements would go on to define Mediterranean civilization for centuries. Roman conquest and Greek cultural victory, 220 to 31 BC. When Rome stepped into the Hellenistic world, it completely changed the political game in the Eastern Mediterranean. What started as a small involvement in Greek matters quickly turned into full-on dominance. But here's the twist. Even as Roman legions marched through Greek lands, Greek culture had a huge impact on Roman life, creating this fascinating mix of political control and cultural influence. So how did all this begin? It all goes back to the tricky diplomacy of the early 2nd century BC. By then, Rome was already the big player in the Western Mediterranean. The First Macedonian War, which happened while Rome was still battling Hannibal, set the stage for their worries about Macedonian power. After taking down Carthage, Rome shifted its focus eastward, answering calls for help from allies like Rhodes and Pergamon. The Second Macedonian War brought direct military action, leading to the Battle of Cynocephalae in 197 BC, where the Roman legion showed off its tactical skills against the Macedonian phalanx. After that, we saw how Rome first handled Greek affairs. At the Isthmian Games, the Roman general Titus Quinctius Flamininus made a big splash by declaring the Greeks free. The crowd went wild, celebrating the news that Rome would pull back its troops instead of just taking over Macedonian control. But this freedom wasn't without its limits. Things got more complicated when Antiochus III of the Seleucid kingdom tried to spread his influence into Greece. The Roman-Seleucid War ended with Antiochus getting decisively beaten at Magnesia in Asia. Minor in 190 BC, the peace deal imposed tough terms, pushing Seleucid power east of the Taurus Mountains and demanding a hefty payment. This cash filled Roman coffers while their allies grabbed former Seleucid lands, spreading Rome's reach without the hassle of direct rule. The fall of Macedonia and the Seleucid kingdom left a power gap that Rome filled, albeit reluctantly. The Senate wanted to keep a balance, but Greek states kept bickering and asking Rome for help. The Third Macedonian War ended with a bang at the Battle of Pydna in 168 BC, where Rome dealt a heavy blow to Macedonian forces. Macedonia was split into 4 republics, and many leading citizens suspected of being pro-Macedonian were sent to Italy as hostages, including the historian Polybius. The final chapter for independent Macedonia came when a pretender briefly revived the kingdom, which led Rome to completely abolish Macedonian autonomy. In 146 BC, Macedonia officially became a Roman province. That same year, Corinth faced brutal destruction after the Achaean League foolishly challenged Roman power. Corinth, one of Greece's most prosperous commercial hubs, was sacked, its people enslaved, and its buildings turned to rubble. This was a shocking reminder that Greek independence existed only at Rome's mercy. While mainland Greece saw direct Roman intervention, the Hellenistic kingdoms initially held onto a semblance of independence. The last king of Pergamon, Attalus III, left his entire kingdom to Rome upon his death in 133 BC, which led to the creation of the Roman province of Asia. The Seleucid kingdom broke apart until Pompey the Great officially ended its existence in 64 BC. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt held on to the illusion of independence the longest, though it increasingly relied on Roman support. Cleopatra VII, the last of the Ptolemies, tried to keep Egyptian autonomy through alliances, but her defeat alongside Mark Antony at Actium in 31 BC sealed Egypt's fate making it a Roman province. For the Greeks, Roman conquest brought a mix of trauma and opportunity. The destruction of Corinth and the enslavement of its people highlighted the harsh realities of resistance. Mainland Greece, now organized as the province of Achaia, faced economic decline. Yet even as political independence faded, Greek cultural influence grew immensely. The Roman poet Horace later captured this dynamic with his famous line, "Captive Greece captured her savage conqueror." This cultural exchange started long before the formal Roman conquest. Greek tutors educated elite Roman youth, and Greek architectural styles and artistic traditions found their way into Roman temples and public buildings. By the late Republic, being fluent in Greek and familiar with Greek culture became essential for elite Romans. The conquest sped up this cultural exchange, bringing many educated Greeks to Italy as both slaves and voluntary teachers. The Roman response to Greek culture wasn't all cheers and applause. Some traditional Romans, like the elder Cato, raised alarms about Hellenic softness seeping in and corrupting Roman values. This clash between Hellenism and Roman tradition sparked a cultural mix that led to a unique Greco-Roman blend. For ambitious Greeks living under Roman rule, mastering the Roman political and legal systems opened doors to influence and success. Take the historian Polybius, for example. He was brought to Rome as a hostage, but ended up becoming a trusted advisor to Roman leaders. More and more elite Greeks picked up Latin, dove into Roman law, and got the hang of Roman administrative ways. Even though Athens lost some political power, it regained status as a top-notch educational hub where young Romans from wealthy families came to study rhetoric, philosophy, and literature. Greek philosophy had a huge impact on Roman thinking, especially Stoicism, which really resonated with the Roman elite because of its focus on duty and self-discipline. Greek knowledge in medicine, astronomy, and engineering found practical uses in Rome. Even in religion, Greek and Roman gods were blended together, creating a shared pantheon. The literary scene was super creative too. Early Roman writers often translated or adapted Greek works. By the late Republic, Roman authors had a deeper, more sophisticated relationship with their Greek predecessors. Virgil's Aeneid, for instance, engaged directly with the Homeric epics while highlighting Roman destiny. The Romans took Greek architectural styles and made them their own, inventing things like the arch and dome, which allowed for bigger, more impressive spaces. This blend kept Greek artistic values alive while meeting Rome's unique needs. The cultural exchange between the Romans and Greeks was pretty unbalanced. The Romans picked and chose aspects of Greek culture that they liked, making it fit their needs. Meanwhile, the Greeks, who had lost their political power, focused on their cultural achievements as their lasting legacy. This created a unique situation where Greeks still held cultural prestige, even while being under Roman rule. Interestingly, the Greek East turned out to be the stronger part of the Roman Empire, and their cultural traditions, blended into Roman life, went on to shape European civilization all the way through the Renaissance and beyond. The immortal legacy, the impact of ancient Greece, goes way beyond its short-lived political power or its geographical limits. Even after Greek independence faded with the Roman conquest, the intellectual, artistic, and political achievements of Hellenic civilization kept shaping how we think and express ourselves. Under Roman rule, Greece held on to its cultural prestige. The Roman elite didn't just admire Greek accomplishments. They actively worked to preserve and share them. The Second Sophistic Movement sparked a renewed interest in classical Greek rhetoric and literature. When Christianity took the lead as the dominant religion, it built much of its theological foundation in Greek, with the New Testament being written in Koine Greek. Early church fathers engaged deeply with Greek philosophical ideas to articulate Christian beliefs. The Byzantine Empire, where people considered themselves Romans, played a key role in preserving and passing on Greek learning while developing its own medieval institutions. In Constantinople, classical texts were still copied and studied. Islamic civilization also played a crucial part in keeping Greek knowledge alive. As Muslim armies took over Byzantine lands, they came across Greek intellectual heritage. There was a systematic effort to translate Greek scientific, medical, and philosophical works into Arabic, sparking incredible intellectual growth that would later influence European thought. The turning point for Greek influence on Western civilization happened during the Italian Renaissance, which was partly fueled by increased contact with Byzantine scholars. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Greek scholars fled westward, bringing manuscripts and language skills with them. This revival of learning transformed European intellectual life. Works by Plato became accessible, and Greek literature inspired new forms of writing. Greek mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy ignited scientific inquiry, playing a big role in the scientific revolution. This excitement for the Renaissance spread throughout Europe, deeply impacting the development of early modern thought and culture. The Enlightenment in the 18th century reinterpreted Greek achievements through its own philosophical lens. Thinkers found in ancient Greece a model of rational inquiry that stood apart from religious authority. By the 19th century, Greek studies became professionalized in the emerging German university system, establishing them as a cornerstone of humanistic education. Throughout these historical shifts, certain Greek contributions have stood out as particularly influential. Athenian democracy, despite its flaws, introduced the groundbreaking idea that citizens should govern themselves through direct participation. Key concepts in modern governance, like citizenship, equality before the law, and limits on power, trace their roots back to Greek political practices. Greek philosophy laid down essential questions and methods that still shape our understanding of existence, knowledge, and ethics today. Socrates' method of questioning, Plato's theory of forms, and Aristotle's systematic approach to knowledge provided frameworks that remain relevant in contemporary thought. Greek contributions to math and science are equally fundamental. Euclidean geometry set the standard for deductive reasoning. Archimedes developed key principles of mechanics. Hippocratic medicine established clinical observation as the basis for understanding disease. Greek artistic and literary innovations set lasting standards. The Greek architectural styles continue to influence Western building design. Homer's epic poems, along with Greek tragedy and comedy, still resonate in literary traditions today. Greek historical writing pioneered a new discipline. Herodotus aimed to explain human events through investigation rather than divine intervention. Thucydides took a more analytical approach. Together, they established history as a field distinct from myth, focusing on human actions and their consequences. Beyond these specific contributions, Greek civilization left behind broader cultural attitudes, like the agonistic spirit, the celebration of competition in athletics, drama, and rhetoric, which emphasized excellence through open contest. The Greek commitment to rational inquiry and the belief that the universe is understandable through human reason are enduring attitudes that have shaped Western thought. This Greek legacy hasn't come without its controversies. Each culture that encountered Greek achievements has selectively adopted, reinterpreted, or rejected elements based on its own needs and values. Modern scholarship has brought back historical context, recognizing both Greek innovations and their influences from other civilizations. Critical perspectives have pointed out the problematic aspects of Greek society, such as slavery and gender inequality. Yet these necessary corrections don't lessen the acknowledgement of the genuine Greek contributions to human thought and culture. The lasting power of Greek achievement lies not in giving fixed answers, but in raising fruitful questions and approaches. Their philosophical traditions gifted us with methods of inquiry rather than rigid conclusions. Their political experiments posed fundamental questions about justice, freedom, and governance that each generation must reconsider. This legacy of questioning, creating, observing, and deliberating rather than any specific conclusion represents Greece's most valuable gift to human civilization. Epilogue. From the early days of Hellenic civilization to its integration into the Roman world, we've covered an incredible 3,000 years filled with human effort, creativity, conflict, and achievement. This journey is one of history's most fascinating stories. A relatively small population, living in a tough landscape, still managed to create lasting monuments of thought, art, literature, and political organization that continue to shape our world today. The Greek tale kicks off with myths that explain the cosmos, moves through the ups and downs of the Bronze Age, and endures a tough rebirth during the Dark Age. It flourished with groundbreaking innovations in the Archaic period, reached stunning cultural heights during the Classical era, expanded dramatically thanks to Alexander's conquests, and finally transformed into the cosmopolitan Hellenistic civilization that Rome would eventually absorb. Throughout all these changes, certain Greek traits stuck around: a commitment to rational inquiry, a celebration of human achievement, a balance between individual excellence and community identity, and a knack for creative adaptation. Even though Greek political independence faded with the Roman conquest, Greek cultural influence kept spreading through Roman channels, Byzantine preservation, Islamic development, and Renaissance revival, ultimately laying the groundwork for Western civilization and making waves worldwide. What's truly remarkable about Greek achievements is how they emerged from such humble beginnings, without the vast resources of places like Egypt or Mesopotamia. Their division into competitive city-states, while politically tricky, actually encouraged intellectual and artistic experimentation that might have been stifled under a more centralized system. Most importantly, the Greeks showed us that even when a civilization faces physical and political collapse, its culture can still thrive. Though Troy fell, Homer kept telling its story. Though classical Athens declined, its philosophical schools nurtured new thinkers. And even when Rome conquered Greece, Greek ideas took hold in Roman minds. The Greek experience serves as a powerful reminder that a civilization's most valuable traits can outlast military defeat or political domination. From our modern viewpoint, Greek civilization feels both distant and familiar. Their big questions: what is justice? How should society be run? What defines human excellence? Are still our questions today. The Greek legacy isn't just found in dusty old manuscripts or silent ruins. It lives on in the ongoing discussions their ideas and creations inspire. It reminds us that civilizations may rise and fall, but their best contributions to human understanding and expression can achieve a kind of immortality, speaking across vast distances of time and space to audiences their creators could never have imagined. In this way, the ancient Greek world never really ended. It continues to thrive in our political systems, philosophical debates, scientific methods, and artistic expressions. That lasting dialogue between ancient Greece and future generations is their most profound legacy. And so, our journey into the past comes to a quiet close. If you're still awake with me, I hope this tale brought you a little peace. If you enjoyed our time together, a gentle like lets me know. And subscribing means you'll never miss the next calm adventure. If you know someone who might need a little comfort tonight, feel free to share this story with them. Thank you, truly, for being here. Until next time, I wish you the sweetest dreams.